All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today, I am super excited to have on Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, and he is the chief physician at Renaissance Periodization. So a lot of you are following Dr. Mike Israetel and his crew. He is the chief physician there. Just to read the brief intro from his bio there, he is a board-certified obesity specialist, lipidologist, and family physician who has helped thousands of patients over the past 9 years lose weight and keep it off. And that's just me saying it. I think you're also known as the doctor who lifts, right?
Yeah, just a little marketing thing. There's a bunch of other doctors who lift, but I coined the term just to make sure people understood how important lifting was for medicine.
Yeah, I guess your brother could also be called that because both of you clearly look like you lift. So today we have a fascinating topic to talk about, and that is weight loss medication in the treatment of obesity. And maybe not just in the treatment of obesity, but in general, because this is a very under-discussed topic that is super interesting, I believe, because that is really something that could revolutionize the weight loss industry, of course, obesity treatment, which is a huge issue around the world, and I guess eventually even the fitness industry on the whole. So I find this whole topic very intriguing. And I guess as a general intro for this whole thing, you as someone who is working with a lot of patients with obesity, I find the topic of obesity to be a fascinating one because weight management, managing body fat gain and loss is something that is relevant for pretty much everybody, I believe, who will be listening to this podcast, albeit many of them or most of them might not be struggling with obesity. But I think those of us who have these problems but have not struggled with obesity can sort of theorize what the real challenges of that population is, which is, hunger. Of course, you get hungrier as you diet. All of us like to eat tasty foods. All of us occasionally will overeat on tasty foods, and sometimes that will make us put on a little bit more weight. But most of us have sort of a cutoff where, okay, I gained enough weight, I had my fun with tasty foods, it's time to stop. So I'm just super fascinated by what are the mechanisms and what are the factors that make someone shoot way past that point where a lot of us would stop. I'm assuming that part of it is hunger. I'm assuming a lot of it has to do with cravings and kind of the whole psychosocial aspect of eating and the cultural aspects of eating. So I guess if you had to boil it down, like what things lead people to become obese or morbidly obese? I don't know if that's still an accepted term. Maybe you can correct me on that. But yeah, can you just give us some intro on that?
Yeah, I mean, when people talk about obesity from just a complete physics standpoint, they'll say it's an energy balance issue. People are eating more calories than they're burning. It's not really helpful because why is that? Why does that happen? Why do some people do that and some people don't? For example, unless something very traumatic happened to me physically or something, you can have brain tumors that just completely disrupt your hunger, and you can have injuries that would make you very sedentary. Unless something like that happens to me, I don't think I'll ever have obesity. So why someone like me versus someone else, all my patients or whatever that come to see me? Well, in the general sense, on a population level, the expanse of this obesity epidemic type of thing really comes from the mismatch between our genetics and our environment. You look at elementary school, grade school, or whatever pictures from, the 70s and 80s, and you compare it to the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and now, and you'll notice a shift in body mass indexes, or whatever you want to say. You'll see a shift in size, basically. And so what would that be? Well, yep, we're eating too much. And why are we eating too much? Well, the only thing that's really changed, or genetics really haven't changed, but our environments have. And so there's a mismatch between our hunger cues in our brain and how much we actually eat. And there's some really cool studies that have looked into this with the processing of the food and the taste of the food and whatnot. But that's the gist. If you look at years ago, decades ago, there were still people that suffered from obesity. And again, this is why it's complex, because it's not just the environment. On an individual level, there may be some other reasons, obviously medical issues and then strongly genetics. The people with the most genetic propensity, those folks generally have stronger appetites. So if you put somebody with the most propensity towards obesity versus not, you put them on an island where their environment is, they got to go fish and hunt and whatever, that person will still probably be heavier, have more adipose and weight compared to the person without the genetics for obesity, but they wouldn't have that severe obesity that we see now. And going back to the terms, we generally say have obesity because we think of it as we think of it as a disease type of thing. You can't catch it. That's kind of a misnomer of what people think diseases are. But condition, disease, whatever, you can have it. And then morbid obesity is the old term for now, probably what we'd call class 3 obesity, which is like a BMI of 40 and above. So we can kind of group it into classes to make it a little bit more specific, as opposed to, hey, you had obesity or not. You can kind of break it up to depend on the clinical course of it and the actual size of the person.
Right. So just on the genetics topic for 1 second. So how much is understood at this moment in time about what those genetic factors are that predispose someone to reach grade 3 obesity? That was
Yeah, you can say classes, class 3 obesity and above. Yeah, in general, the differences it's in the central nervous system and likely in the appetite centers that are related to appetite. So people think, and I get in these arguments online. I don't even know why. I don't know why I waste my time. But I think there are people that are lurking around, and I help teach people. Obesity, I wouldn't call it a choice because a lot of it's just passive. We all kind of go through passively eating what's served to us, and we don't choose to have that many more helpings than somebody else does. It's kind of a subconscious thing. So you combine that with environment. So when you're younger and somebody, your family feeds you whatever food that you get, if you're getting the highly processed food, you're going to subconsciously eat more than the family who's serving, mostly whole satiating foods. Then you top it off with some genetics that kind of push you further in that direction where you're subconsciously eating more, and you kind of passively go through life gaining more and more weight. Now people are like, no, obesity is a choice. No, I'd say that the choice of each meal, you do have a choice. Like, hey, I probably shouldn't eat this whole pizza, and instead I should have the whatever salad and sirloin and baked potato with minimal butter on it or something like that. Yeah, you could technically make those choices, but going through life, it's kind of a passive thing. So the attempt to prevent it, to actually make that conscious decision, is a choice. It's just that most of us don't really think about it that way. We don't wake up and just say, hey, I choose to have obesity today. I'm going to choose each meal so I can have obesity. It's just we don't even think about it. But you can make the choice to prevent it, or at least attempt to lose weight. So I will say that just real quick as a caveat.
Right. So kind of one thing, we talk about this a lot on the podcast with kind of just friends of mine that are regular on this podcast. And we are kind of just playing the armchair obesity expert here because obviously largely we can just theorize about these things. But one thing that we often brought up is like, look, imagine the hungriest you've ever felt. Like, let's say you're dieting down to 7% body fat. You've been in a calorie deficit for 4 months. You haven't seen anything over whatever, like 1,800 calories as a 180-pound guy. You're like thinking about food all the time. You never feel full after meals. Like imagine if someone had that at a body fat range, which would make them approach obesity or even be there already. Like, is that something that like happens from your clinical experience? Like, is that a real thing? Like, are some people that, for lack of a better term, screwed from a genetic standpoint?
Yeah, it's probably slightly different, but yeah, it's more so when the person attempts to lose weight and you give them what is the appropriate amount of calories they should eat for a lesser body weight, and they're just starving. And so like, why is it fair that I actually eat a lot of calories. When I cut my calories, I get freaking hungry. I crave the same thing, but I got a lot of muscle, and and I do eat mostly whole food, so it's different. But yeah, it's what you described is kind of what they're going through, and that's exactly the reason why we have these medicines and surgeries, mind you. And what they say is that I feel normal again, or I feel finally what I think is normal anyway. That example, that analogy is pretty much spot on.
Right. Okay. So then kind of tying this together with our topic today. So weight loss medication. So how close are these things to being the magic bullet? Like, is there like a combination of pills that someone can swallow or injections that they can take, which as long as they keep up with it, so this is just like a very general overview, then essentially their problems with hunger regulation, food cravings would be like solved for good? Like, in theory, is that technologically available for us at this moment in time, or it's not quite there yet?
We're getting there. There are currently a few agents out there that have worked in the past, that do work in certain receptors in the brain that, for certain individuals who will respond to it, has like a big time effect on their cravings. And then we have these different parts of our brain that control our appetite, and what I'd call like the reward center, which kind of controls our cravings and wants, likes, and that type of thing. And we have agents that kind of modulate each part of those. And so you really got to find what works in certain individuals. Some drugs just work in most everybody, no matter what. So I'll just say the newest one that everybody's been raving about, that isn't actually available yet at the dose that was studied, is the Semaglutide agent. And this is what's called a glucagon-like peptide 1 analog. And this is some highly, it will just knock out your appetite, and along with your appetite, your cravings, and all sorts of other things. And that's why we see just, it's a funny term. We say robust. We use that all the time when we're talking about medical terms. You'll hear doctors, oh, it's just very robust, but it's robust. I mean, you can see massive amounts of weight loss. I use it for patients all the time. In the dose that's approved for type 2 diabetes. They're trying to get it approved for obesity it's almost 2.5 times. The dose that I use is 1 milligram, but the dose in the obesity studies is 2.4 milligrams of the semaglutide. But it's a weekly injection, and it just knocks out people's appetites. And we're now seeing, somewhere an average of 15% body weight loss over the course of a year. And that may not seem like a lot, but when you look at studies of just lifestyle, like simply lifestyle, intensive lifestyle, you see an average of like 5 to 6 to 7% weight loss. And that doesn't seem like a lot either. So you get someone that's, 300 pounds, 10% is 30 pounds, 5% is 15 pounds. So if you can get somebody to lose close to 50 pounds using a drug, that's pretty good. Now, the question is always about side effects and long-term worry, but so far it seems like this is, especially, studied in high-risk individuals, it seems like a very a very powerful, safe drug that likely has most benefit versus risk or harm. So yeah, we have that, and we have a bunch of other agents that out there too. If you watched my series, I went through kind of each of them and why we would use them and cases where we'd use them. The semaglutide stuff, if I could just put everybody on that to start with, as long as insurance would pay for it, I'd like to start there usually because it's a safe, powerful medicine.
Yeah, so why don't we just go through all of these kind of in a bullet point format? Obviously, we won't go into it in quite as much detail as you had done in your series because it was very comprehensive. So I will link to it in the show notes below. But let's talk about these glutides, so these GLP-1 analogs. So how do these, so the ones that I know of are Liraglutide, which is a daily administration, Semaglutide, which is once a week. It has this week-long half-life, and then Dulaglutide, if I'm pronouncing that right. So how do these things compare? And like maybe just briefly, what's the kind of mechanism of action, and like what do people feel? What are people supposed to feel when they try these things?
Yeah, these are cool drugs. There's actually the scientist I'm now a little bit closer to, just because I'm in one of these Twitter DM groups with some very high-level scientists. I'm lucky to be in one of these groups. It's really cool to be part of that. But these glucagon-like peptide ones, in the 50s, they did a study. They thought that, or they wanted to see if you injected sugar into your veins versus ingesting sugar raised your insulin levels. You would think that injecting sugar straight into your veins, it would get to your pancreas would detect it quicker, and you would shoot out a bunch of insulin. But it turned out that people drinking the glucose had higher amounts, and they attributed this to they called it the incretin effect for intestinal secretion of insulin. Well, it turns out that there are a few of these incretin hormones, and one of them is this GLP-1. So throughout the years, and they developed analogs to it because it has such a short half-life, our own endogenous GLP-1, they found in Gila monsters, these little lizard things, their saliva had kind of this analog. That was the start of it, basically. But they make these things now to where our own endogenous enzymes don't break it down so quickly. And that's kind of the difference between all these. So the first was exenatide. That was like a twice a day. Then it went to liraglutide, or liraglutide, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But that was like a once a day. Then we got into like Dulaglutide, I don't know. Once a week. Then they found a way to make the exenatide a once a week, which not many people use. But now we got the semaglutide, and it's once a week. And the difference is between the semaglutide, it seems to it's a half-life thing, number one, and number two, it hits the receptors differently, has to be up in the brain. There's multiple receptors of this GLP-1, but there's parts of our brain that control appetite that when stimulated shuts our hunger off. GLP-1 also decreases gastric emptying, which may have an effect, of course, on appetite just by that alone. It does increase insulin levels, as noted, due to that incretin effect, and that's why it's so good at lowering blood sugar. It inhibits glucagon. Glucagon is this hormone that gets our liver to push out more glucose. It's kind of a survival thing. It helps us keep our homeostasis. But in type 2 diabetes, you don't want more blood sugar coming out. So it inhibits the glucagon and decreases gastric emptying, helps increase insulin, which most people would say should cause weight gain, but in fact that's not what mainly controls our body weights. So people lose massive amounts of body weight because their appetite's down. They're eating much less. They can control their appetites. And that's pretty much the mechanism. But that's the semaglutide is. They think there's even a more powerful effect than, say, like the dulaglutide. And they are looking at higher doses of the dulaglutide now, and you can prescribe that for better diabetes management. But for obesity, we do that as well, because they all have similar effects. It's just the semaglutide seems to have a little bit stronger of an effect, it seems.
Right. So it's not just the half-life that's different, but it's also more potent, like milligram for milligram?
That's the thought. I mean, there's hypotheses out there, because it's a great question. It's like, well, why would this one? It has to hit the receptors differently. That's the only thing I can think. It has a more potent effect. And yeah, you also have to not just have more side effects either, because the side effects can be pretty bad. The nausea is a bad one. Usually it goes away in most people, but you don't want to. You don't want to get people feeling like crap just to make them not eat. So once that goes away, there's still a massive appetite effect.
Hey guys, just a brief interruption. If you like my content, value my opinion, and find my methods for getting and staying lean and building muscle intriguing, then I'm just letting you know that I do have a comprehensive, 100% individualized online coaching service. If you'd like to have me in your corner and use my best methods to achieve your fitness goals, then check out the show description for more information about how you can most easily reach me and apply. I will follow up with you, and you and I together will determine if/exactly how I can best help you to reach your goals. Whether it's my one-on-one or group coaching service, we will find a system that is the best fit for you. All right, that's it. Let's continue with the show. Right. Okay, so then next one on our list that I wanted to touch on is Phentermine. So you had a video on that as well. And it was not just Phentermine, it was Phentermine combined with something that I'm...
Topiramate.
Topiramate, yes. What should we know about this in a general sense? And then how does that compare in efficacy with GLP-1 analogs?
Yeah, the Phentermine has been around for a long time. You know, the history of obesity medicines, they looked at like DNP. People that are bodybuilders will know that uncoupler effect. It does raise your metabolic rate. It just comes with some nasty potential side effects.
Such as dying.
Narrow therapeutic window there. Safety is a concern. So we don't use that. There may be a day where we have an uncoupler that we can do safely. I don't know though. We'll see. They tried to use thyroid hormone, T3. The problem is you get arrhythmias at a higher rate than what would be considered safe on a population level. Plus, you lose lean body mass as well. I do use thyroid medicine. I don't know if I mentioned this in there. There are patients who lose massive amounts of weight, and they do have metabolic adaptations. Their thyroid levels are a little bit lower, almost like kind of that subclinical to clinical hypothyroidism, but they don't have any Hashimoto's or autoimmune or iodine deficiencies, and so I do add back some thyroid hormone, but that's in special cases. But they've looked at amphetamines and all sorts of stuff, but a lot of side effects, heart rate issues. So with Phentermine, it's a amphetamine-like medicine. It's a sympathomimetic, so it works in our sympathetic nervous system, norepinephrine and some dopamine as well, and it has major appetite control when used by itself. Now the thing is, it's only approved what we call monotherapy for 12 weeks, like 3 months, for whatever reason. That's here in the States anyway. And so recently, I can't believe it's been this long, but it's almost been 10 years, but they studied it with a lower dose version of it in combination with something called topiramate. Topiramate was originally used for seizures. Then they found it worked actually for migraines. And then they're like, oh, wow, this actually has some effects with like cravings, and there's a little bit of weight loss. So the thought is you use smaller doses of each of these. You don't get as many side effects, but if you combine them and it hits different receptors in the brain, you could lower appetite without the side effects. And that's what they did. And they put these things together and use lower doses. And you do see, before the semaglutide came out, it was the best, most efficacious drug. Now, the issue is fen-phen, which was out in the 90s and then got taken off. It was a phentermine-fenfluramine combination, and the fenfluramine component was really the bad part. It had some activity at the serotonin receptor, the HT2B receptor. Anyway, they thought it was causing heart valve issues, and so they took it off the market. But phentermine was fine and stayed on the market, but people were scared about it, and it's only approved for 3 months, and so it doesn't really get used. But off-label, a lot of obesity doctors will use it. Again, it seems to be, especially in the lower dose combined with topiramate, longer term, it seems to not have any increased risk of cardiovascular events or anything like that we could tell. But it is very powerful. The topiramate works probably in GABA receptors in the brain, which is separate from the phentermine. So you're hitting a couple different receptors and using lower doses and having an effect. Topiramate also is used in binge eating disorders. So there's absolute plausibility that that would work well together with the phentermine. And honestly, I think, personally, I think the future is using a little bit of multiple different drugs like this to and personalize it, but we're not there yet. That's going to be a long time before we really figure that out. And it may never figure it out because it's hard to have long-term studies to see if you're really personalizing it. But that's what I think.
Right. So phentermine on its own has only been approved for 12 weeks at a time. And then, if I'm understanding you correctly, was mainly due to that fen-phen thing with that other compound in there, which was more problematic. So is it, if someone was using it for, even year round, if someone has really serious issues with appetite, or someone who just has to go on a very, very long diet with serious obesity, class 3 obesity, could it be very plausibly be even fine for a very long duration?
Yeah, so I think so. The thing is, it's just due to lack of studies, and then it's a generic drug, so this comes down to money. Unfortunately, I really wish we had billions of dollars to just know the truth, as opposed to drug companies and FDA and whatever having to play these games, because really it's probably fine. It's just monotherapy by itself hasn't been studied long term, and that's simply the reason. There's hypothetical concerns over the sympathetic mimetic actions of it. So you give somebody what seems to be like an upper, but it's not like amphetamines. It's not addictive. Like amphetamines have that more addictive properties, but we just don't have those long-term studies other than when it's combined with topiramate, and that's why it's approved indefinitely. It's approved for long-term use, but by itself it's just not. I think it's probably fine. It's just I still shy away from it more and try to go to the GLP-1s because we have more data and plausibility is better with those, but it's probably fine.
Right. Now, a side question off of this is another substance which you have mentioned in your series, but I often see it being brought up in the same conversation with phentermine, is Sibutramine or Sibutramine. I don't exactly know how to pronounce it. So you mentioned in your series that has kind of not fulfilled the hopes around it, or was taken off for side effect issues. So what's the deal there? How does that compare with phentermine in terms of efficacy, and then in terms of side effect profile?
Yeah, it's kind of a similar type of drug. It's a sympathomimetic drug. It has a few other properties about it, but they thought they saw more events, strokes and things like that coming from those using it, and so it was taken off. And There's actually a lot of controversy with that. It's interesting seeing debates, but since it's not even approved, I wouldn't be able to prescribe it even if I wanted to. You can get it on the black market or whatever you want to say, but yeah, that's pretty much why they thought they saw a signal coming from harm there. And again, there's still debate about it, but it doesn't even matter because I can't even get a hold of it, even if I thought the data looked fine to me. But really, when it comes down to obesity, it's like, well, for vanity purposes, yeah, you want to lose some weight, but from a clinician standpoint, we want to reduce, improve quality of life, improve quantity of life, ideally too, and if you're increasing death with a medicine compared to not, probably not a good idea, and so that's why they don't approve it. But that's the gist.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So now the next class of compounds that you discussed, this is what I found personally the most fascinating, because I'm surrounded by a lot of people that are obese or just out of shape. They would want to get leaner, but they're not into the whole fitness lifestyle, so they just have this perpetual challenge with it. And a lot of them, from the way they are describing their challenges, I really don't think that something like a Semaglutide or a Phentermine would be the magic bullet for them, because their issue is not that they are hungry. It's many times I'm looking at what they're eating, and it's not, they're not even big eaters. They're just like nibblers. Like, I'm looking at what they're doing, and my thought is like, man, if you just had better eating habits, like you could get contest lean in no time, because like appetite just doesn't seem to be like a big issue for you. But what their issue is that they just cannot refrain from eating super rewarding, hyper palatable foods. So this combination of bupropion.
Yeah, bupropion. Yeah,
bupropion and naltrexone. So so what does this do? Because this is super fascinating.
Yeah, so I have patients like that. You hear about the emotional eaters, the stress eaters, and it's really hard to tease out what's truly just purely psychological versus what it doesn't seem to be like hunger, but it's like cravings driving it. And so this bupropion medicine, most people think of it as an antidepressant. It works with norepinephrine and dopamine in slightly different ways than the phentermine, but it has those reward center pathway changes, modulating changes there. So when you give that, people tend to lose weight as opposed to gaining weight, or antidepressants tend to be either considered weight neutral, but more so they're probably considered to be more weight positive drugs. But bupropion is one of the exceptions, and if people lose weight when they do it, but they stop, it's not a lot, but they do lose weight. It's also found that bupropion helps people quit smoking, so that's kind of cool. So there's another medicine, naltrexone, and this medicine obviously is used. It can be used for. It's an opioid antagonist, but we use it for drinking cessation, alcohol cessation, and it's interesting. I talked about this POMC, one of these parts of your brains goes up to kind of higher areas in the brain that control appetite and hunger, and one of them is this POMC. And so the bupropion does stimulate this POMC a little bit. The problem is there's this auto feedback from that. One of the little things that's released is an endorphin, and then it shuts that down. And POMC controls a lot of your hunger. So when you stimulate it with bupropion, there's this kind of auto feedback that shuts it down from the endorphins released. Well, the naltrexone is an opioid antagonist, and it blocks that little beta endorphin. And so together they kind of potentiate and synergistic, whatever, because the naltrexone by itself doesn't actually have much weight loss. So when you put them together, it's really a synergistic effect. They more weight loss than what you'd see if you just added the weight loss by themselves. So you put them together, and there's people lose weight. Now the real hypothesis of this, and I think there's some studies coming out that kind of look at this. The people that truly have these cravings, these more, I would say, reward pathway kind of dysfunctions, where like you said, they're not even hungry. They're craving a cracker, a salty potato chip or something like that. I have those issues sometimes at night. I think all of us have that. We're like, I want something salty, or I want something sweet tonight, or I want something salty and sweet, whatever. Well, you give them these medicines, and not only will their hunger decrease, but those differences in cravings may vanish, or at least be tempered down so much to where you can handle it. So that's the idea behind that combination of medicine. I use it. I don't use it as much anymore, unless they truly have these like true craving issues, because the amount of weight loss seen on a population level, it's not very good. It's like 6-7%, which it's not that great on a population level compared to like the Phentermine, topiramate, and the Semaglutide. But it's an option, and the people that respond really well to it those are the people I'm trying to find when I'm looking at them, like the people with real cravings, where I'm like, hey, this might work for you, and it does. They respond very well. They need a low dose of it, and they end up losing 10-20% of their weight because I've found the right person to use it in.
Right. So it almost seems like if someone was to use a combination of this and say semaglutide, then it would be like the ultimate killer combo. like at that point, you literally have no drive for food, like tasty or otherwise. It's just like that would be like a death punch. Like, would that be a fair characterization?
What, to use them together? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like use this bupropion, naltrexone together with a semaglutide, so you get the hunger knocked out completely and the cravings. Like what's left? Like what is there left to drive someone to eat?
Yeah. So in these cases, it does come down to there are places where it's just psychological. Like I have patients who did bariatric surgery, and then I put them on massive amounts of different drugs, and they told me that they just can't stop themselves from getting a candy bar at the pharmacy when they're going to get their other medicines. And I'm like, well, at this point, I don't think any drug or anything is going to work. There's something else driving them to eat. But yeah, if someone still had cravings while on semaglutide, their hunger and everything's tempered down, it wouldn't be a bad option. Semaglutide does such a good job. I mean, like, it just nails everything. I'm pretty sure. I don't know people that actually have these cravings while using semaglutide, but if they did, this wouldn't be a bad option to try.
Yeah, I actually know somebody who is currently doing Ramadan fasting, and he just took his shot of semaglutide, 1 milligram in the beginning of the week, and this is the easiest Ramadan fast he's ever had. Like he said, it's
amazing.
Yeah, he said it's zero hunger. It's like not even thinking about food, and even when the feeding time comes, like he has to pay attention to get in enough protein, because even then he would have a tendency to undereat. And we are talking about a fairly lean individual here. So
amazing.
It seems to be super powerful. A funny thing that I saw, or actually, did I miss out anything that you mentioned in your series?
Yeah, there's one called Lorcaserin. I don't think I went into it very much. It was a cleaner drug version of the Phentermine that got taken off, but this one also got taken off. They thought they saw a signal for cancers. So they may get away from these serotonin drugs. I don't know. I'm not sure I don't even know what type of cancers it was. I'm a bit skeptical, but it wasn't that powerful of a drug anyway by itself, so whatever.
Yeah, a funny one that I saw is, I believe it's pronounced Orlistat, which...
Oh yeah, that's right.
which yeah, I mean, at first it seems like, yeah, this is the only FDA approved medication for like long-term use for weight loss. And then when I read into what it actually does, I'm like, oh, like this doesn't sound that great. So what's your perspective on that one?
Yeah, it's a lipase inhibitor. It basically helps you not absorb the fat that you eat, which means it has to go out your body, which means it goes out your ass. So it's associated with loose stools, wet farts, and that type of thing. And so people don't use it that often, but it actually works well. Of course, if you're not absorbing fat, you're not absorbing calories, weight drops. The problem is the side effect issue. So we don't use it too often. If somebody suffers from constipation, it may be something to go to. I just loose stools and incontinence. When you're farting, it's not good. Obviously, people will not be happy, but that's basically what it does.
Yeah, and I'm guessing if someone is so like let's take a hypothetical individual who managed to reach levels of obesity on a low-fat diet, like it wouldn't even benefit that person.
Right. I mean, yeah, correct.
Yeah. So I guess the million-dollar question, which I think anybody who is listening to this podcast is thinking about now, is why are these things not more widely available? Like it's, I mean, for one, for anybody who is struggling with obesity, like a no-brainer. But even for those that aren't, I mean, if you could just take something that would knock your hunger out and it wouldn't force you into actually other behaviors that even like, health conscious, people into the fitness lifestyle have to take on to lose weight, which is like a very limited selection of foods, often foregoing like a well-rounded, nutritious diet. Because, broccoli and large bowls of lettuce are just more filling than something that has a richer micronutrient profile. Like, man, if I could just take a shot of semaglutide in the beginning of the week and the diet would be a breeze, like, why can't I just walk into a pharmacy and get this? So what's the reason behind it? Is it the cost of manufacturing? Is it the lack of research? And then I guess eventually it will happen, but how long do you think until that's going to happen?
Yeah, great question. I think so there's a few things at play here. Number one, people are still scared. Doctors are still scared because of the fen era. Number two, insurances don't pay for it all the time or at all. Number three, there is a big obesity stigma bias that basically, hey, if you're not going to even try to eat better, then you don't deserve this drug, which that's just wrong, because the drug could help them eat better. And a drug would help them eat less regardless. It doesn't even matter. They should obviously try to change their lifestyle, but like, who cares? It'll help them eat less regardless. It's not a cheat. It's not cheating. It would help them. So, those things combined, expenses, that's really the issue. The semaglutide stuff, it will be approved, I guarantee, somewhere in the summer or the fall for obesity at higher doses. It's going to cost a lot. We have to get governments and insurances to pony up the money. Doctors have to be educated on it because they're still not prescribing other medicines, even though they should, for those with obesity that struggle, because they just tell them to eat less, move more, which, yeah, that's what they need to do, but that's not very helpful. So yeah, all those things combined basically is why. So if everybody understood the need for them and understood the risk and whatever, and insurances were paying for them and manufacturing costs went down, I think they would be more widely used.
Yeah. Do you think it will ever get to a point where, Joe Schmo, who is not obese, just, wants to get leaner for the summer, can walk into a pharmacy and buy a dose of semaglutide?
In some countries, that's possible. In the United States, not anytime soon.
Wah, wah. That's a sad ending. I guess just one in your clinical practice and clinical experience, like, are there people who actually benefit from using some of these tools pretty much on a permanent basis? I'm guessing the goal is always to like use the least amount of drugs possible, and if you can achieve something by just a healthy lifestyle, that's not only going to be logistically easier because you don't have to source certain substances year round to have access to it, but it's going to be cheaper. It's just going to be more sustainable in the long term. But like, are there instances where someone is just pretty much maintaining like one of these tools in their arsenal at all times on a permanent basis?
Yeah, that's the idea. It's used indefinitely. We're trying to change the paradigm thought of this to be like the same way we would do for blood pressure or for type 2 diabetes or cholesterol or anything like that. If you use it and your weight goes down, it's probable you're going to need it for long term, but you can, if you change your lifestyle habits to be like, okay, I am going to eat more broccoli and chicken breasts and whatever, and then you slowly wean off the drug, it's possible the food changes you made could hold your appetite at bay. I would say the majority of people, they're going to have to stay on it long term. Every time we take these medicines off, the people start regaining their weight, even if we switch them to a placebo and they don't even know it, which is that's what's so interesting. It's like, hey, Jillian Michaels did this whole thing about how you don't need this medicine, and she failed to even read the study where they switched these people to placebos. Half of them, they switched half of these people to placebos and whatever, and they're still getting the shots, and so they still think they're getting the medicine, and they regain their weight because it's powerful appetite suppressing stuff, and that's kind of the issue here with those trying to lose weight and keep it off. So ideally people would come off of it, but the reality is majority will still have to stay on them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Jillian Michaels obviously is going to say that. I mean, I'm not going to lie, like I work in the fitness industry and people come to me for, diet advice and helping them to get lean. I can understand that this is scary to hear about revolutionary compounds like this for someone whose livelihood is to help people lose weight through giving them sound advice. But I don't know, like if this was available widely and I could just tell a client who comes to me with like serious problems with overeating and such, like, hey, walk into your pharmacy and get it. Like, I would be more than happy to suggest that.
That's good. There's a lot of personal trainers out there who just basically, I don't understand. They think it's a crutch or a way out, and it's just like, no, I mean, ideally, they would just do lifestyle changes. We wouldn't want to use a medicine and pay money and whatever potential side effects or whatever. But like, the reality is, we got to treat we got to treat it. We got to treat it somehow. If you're a good coach, you'll understand the need for this and other behavioral therapies and being a good coach in general.
Yeah, I guess just one random thing, which to give some sliver of hope for people who maybe they cannot get their prescription, it's not available in their country or whatever. Is there anything like over the counter that is obviously it's not going to rival in efficacy these things, but that's at least like somewhat potent at reducing appetite and cravings and those sorts of things that you have seen?
Yeah, there's some supplements out there that they're just, the long-term safety, it's not very good. We got fiber supplements like glucomannan and some of these things that may have an effect, but even still, the efficacy of weight loss doesn't seem to be much with them. Honestly, I would just stay away from them. Himbine and these fat burner type of appetite suppressant supplements out there, I wouldn't be able to even recommend them because long term, I'm not sure of the safety on them. So you might as well just stay away from them. Caffeine has maybe a tiny little effect, but even still, not much. So I would just stick to spending your money on big, huge salads and stuff like that. Volume food. I mean, that's the way we treat preach at RP is basically volume, 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 low palatability foods first, and then if you want to have a treat, obviously have it. But I'd put your money towards that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's why I was so excited about your series, because it's like that would be so cool if there were like truly effective appetite suppressants that were not super strong stimulants. Because caffeine works, yohimbine works, but if I cannot sleep from it, and then I'm just adding wakeful hours to my diet and more hungry hours to my diet that way, then I'm not really winning anything. So if there was an appetite suppressant that also allowed me to sleep, that would be fantastic. It's just a shame that they are prescription medications. But anyway, Dr. Spencer, this was incredibly informative. So even though we didn't spend much time just beating around the bush and we got right to the real thing, we still managed to talk for almost an hour. So I'm super appreciative of your time and for you agreeing to come on the podcast. So I guess last question is where can people find out more about your work and anything that you would like to mention?
Yeah, Instagram at Dr. Nadolsky, DrNadolsky. I'm there. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I even have a TikTok, but I hate TikTok. It's just the comments are toxic and there's a bunch of idiots there. But and then RP, of course, RP Strength. Follow all the RP folks.